I know people have talked to you about physical health and what happens if you don't exercise. I also know people have probably talked to you about your nutritional habits and how that affects your body long term. However, there's a third element of physical health that is not always mentioned, and it's sleep. And here's why it's important. What really happens to your brain when you don't sleep? It's way more than just feeling tired. Things can get pretty crazy. I want you to imagine seeing things that aren't there or feeling like your mind is playing tricks on you. In just 3 days without sleep, your brain can become so mixed up that it starts acting like it's in a complete state of confusion. Think psychosis. I doubt any of you will stay up for 3 days straight, but it is probable that many of you don't get enough sleep multiple nights during the week. For this reason, I think it's pivotal that you know the impact of lack of sleep. So let's take this wild journey together. I'll take you through hour by hour of what happens to your brain when it is starved for sleep. We'll break down the science behind why you feel so lethargic, examining the parts of the brain that start to deteriorate even within the first rough night's sleep. It isn't about just a lack of energy. It's about how your mind can lose its grip on reality. Stay tuned for the whole video, because what happens on the third day is quite disturbing. I know. You probably feel like I'm being a bit of an alarmist. But we've all stayed up to study for a big test or a fun night out, thinking that being tired is just part of the deal, right? But what really happens to your brain when you skip sleep? Here's the big eye-opener. Sleep isn't just a luxury. It's something your brain absolutely needs. I want you to think of sleep as your nighttime cleaning crew. Helps organize memories, reset chemicals, and keep everything running smoothly. When you decide to skip out on sleep, it's basically sending that crew home. It's like skipping your daily chores, if you will, except for your brain. Just imagine what your house would look like if you didn't do the dishes, take out the garbage, do the laundry. You ever seen that show, Hoarders? Yeah, nasty. That's your brain without sleep. So let's start with the first 24 hours, what I like to call the tipping point. In the first 24 hours without sleep is familiar territory for a lot of us. You might even feel a weird burst of energy, but don't be fooled. Your brain is starting to struggle. What's the first thing to go? Your ability to think clearly, thanks to an important part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex. That part of your brain is working as the CEO, making the big decisions, and keeping your emotions in check. After just one sleepless night, that CEO is already having a tough time keeping up. First, the connection between your CEO, that prefrontal cortex, and your emotional alarm center, the amygdala, begins to get really fuzzy. It's like a bad connection on a telephone line. You know the person on the other line is sending you a message, but you have no idea what they're saying. You see, the amygdala is always on alert, looking for danger. It's part of our evolutionary code. But without direction from the prefrontal cortex, it becomes super reactive. Studies show that after just one night of sleep, the amygdala can become overreactive by more than 60%. This is why you might feel cranky and anxious just after a single all-nighter. Your brain's alarm is stuck in the on position. At the same time, chemicals build up in your brain, making you feel sleepy. With too much sleepy chemicals swooshing around in your brain, your attention chemicals are completely washed out. When that happens, your focus decreases and your reaction time slows down. Can you believe that about 18 hours awake, you are likely to function like a drunken fool? To add to the craziness, your brain might even pump out extra dopamine, making you feel that quick burst of energy. But don't be fooled. This is just your brain trying and mostly failing to keep you awake. Let's take an example. Samantha, a high school junior, decides to pull an all-nighter. We've all seen it. She's working to stay up to finish her term paper, which is due the next day. Initially energized by the caffeine she's drinking, she quickly begins to struggle about 4 a.m. Her ability to articulate her ideas fades as her prefrontal cortex struggles to keep up with her racing thoughts. Meanwhile, her emotional side, fueled by the amygdala, becomes easily disturbed by minor annoyances, making that cricket noise just outside of her window infuriating. Now let's move on. Section 2, 48 hours without sleep. I like to call losing your grip. After 48 hours without sleep, you're no longer just tired. Now you're entering serious trouble. This is where your grip on what's real starts to slip. A common experience at this point is something called microsleeps. This means your brain sneaks in tiny moments of sleep that last just a second or two. You could be chatting with someone and suddenly your brain checks out. You won't even know it's happening. But these little blackouts can make activities like driving really dangerous. Your perception of reality also begins to get wild. People often report seeing strange halos around lights or objects that appear to be bending. Time can feel totally messed up. What feels like 5 minutes might be an hour. Why does this happen? The parts of your brain that process information, like your vision center, are starting to run low on energy, so they just can't keep up. When your brain runs out of good information and energy, it starts to fill in the empty spaces with its own wild ideas. The line between what's real and what's made up blurs. Additionally, that initial surge of dopamine that we get has given way to confusion. Your brain's dopamine receptors aren't working properly anymore, which can leave you feeling dazed and disconnected from everything and everyone around you. A state called depersonalization. Let's say Officer Ramirez, a busy city police officer, has been on duty for 48 hours straight. It's a chaotic weekend in the town. Exhausted, he finds himself directing traffic when suddenly he experiences one of those microsleeps. He zones out for just a moment and leaving the intersection completely uncontrolled. As he shakes off the fatigue, he notices strange halos around the streetlights and feels like time is slipping away. A mere 5 minutes could feel like an eternity. His perception begins to warp, and he questions the reality around him. As an elephant appears to be waiting at the traffic stop, and then suddenly it morphs back into a gray truck. That's what it's like to be awake 48 hours straight. Let's move on. Section 3, 72 hours without sleep. Total system failure. Your brain is basically in meltdown mode. By now, you likely experience vivid hallucinations, like seeing things that aren't there, or even hearing voices. It can get pretty intense. So what's causing this scary break from reality? First, remember that CEO, the prefrontal cortex we talked about? It's nearly offline at this point, which means it can't help you control your thoughts and feelings anymore. Brain scans show that it's barely using any energy. Next, your brain's neurotransmitter systems, especially dopamine, are in total chaos. This flood of dopamine causes your brain to overload, leading to bizarre beliefs and stories that aren't real. And here's another issue. Your memory functions are pretty much shut down. The hippocampus, which helps you form new memories, is struggling to work at all. It relies on connections between brain cells, but after 72 hours without sleep, those connections are completely gone. This means your ability to remember new things is absolutely zip. Finally, the brain's cleaning crew from earlier, it's been on strike for 3 total days. The system works best during a deep sleep and helps clear out toxins in your brain. After such a long time without sleep, those toxins build up and cause even more problems. Your brain isn't just malfunctioning, it's drowning in its own waste. Let's take one last example. Jake, college student, is deep into exam week and he decides to forego sleep entirely to cram in his finals. After 72 hours without rest, he reaches a critical tipping point. Instead of focusing on his notes, he starts to experience vivid hallucinations. One minute, he's convinced he sees his roommate sitting across the room, when in reality, the space is completely empty. Other times, he hears whispers that seem to come from nowhere, filling him with a sense of dread. Good luck trying to study in that state of mind. So, what about the aftermath and recovery? Well, the good news is, unlike your physical fitness and nutrition, sleep you can recover from pretty quickly. For the most healthy people, everything we just talked about can bounce back. The brain has an amazing ability to recover, and as long as you give it what it craves most, sleep, you'll be all right. When you finally crash, your brain gets straight to work. It prioritizes deep sleep to clean up that mess. That cleaning crew goes into overdrive, getting rid of all that toxic junk. Your neurotransmitter systems start to balance out again, and those important connections between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala are reconnected, helping you manage your emotions properly. So we've traveled from a feeling of being a bit moody in 24 hours to the wild ride of losing touch with reality by 72 hours. The whole experience highlights a really important truth. Sleep is absolutely crucial. It's the foundation for how we think, feel, and see the world. Pushing yourself to stay up late isn't something to brag about. It's a quick path to a lot of trouble in your brain. If you have a tendency to grab your phone late into the night, pull an all-nighter to study, or skip sleep to binge watch just one more show, now you know the impact. As you now understand, a lack of sleep has a negative effect on your 5 emergent intelligences. Intellectually, you have decreased cognition, thinking skills. Socially, you communicate with less clarity. Emotionally, you have decreased empathy for others. Ethically, you struggle to determine reality, so how are you going to make a good decision? And physically, a breakdown of your immune system, respiratory system, and cardiovascular system. It's really a dangerous state. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you struggle to get a restful night's sleep? Do you experience any weird feelings or effects after a night of restlessness? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this information helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for more exciting science about the brain. I want you to stay curious and please make sure you get your Z's. Thank you.